something's going to happen. And the question is, do you want to taste the sugar or be the sugar? Do you want to respond to the change, or do you want to be the change?
This podcast episode is sponsored by Astrology Hub's Academy. Wherever you are on your astrology journey, we have a class that will help you get to the next level. Hey, everybody. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the week ahead and diving into why Rick Levine says that this is another week of significant change. For those of you who are new to our channel, welcome. We are passionate about sharing the wisdom and guidance astrology can provide, especially when facilitated by incredible astrologers like the one we have here today. And here on the Weekly Weather, we give you practical tips for working with the changing astrological tides. If you are new, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell and enjoy the journey with us. Thank you. Right now, we're about to dive into the astrology of the week of January 30th to February 5th with one of our favorite astrologers here at Astrology Hub, Master Astrologer Rick Merlin Levine. All right, Rick. So why are you saying this is a week of more change?
Okay, I am, but you said significant change, and it's not that that's wrong. It's just that significance is a personal issue, and some people will glide through the week like it was another week, and other people's entire lives will change. So I always like to be a little bit careful at giving enough people the width to create their own experience, because one of the downfalls of this type of astrology is that people get performance pressure. Oh my God, my life didn't change significantly. I'm a screw up. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, yeah.
So Rick, can we tell based on the transits that are happening this week, can we tell who is more likely to have significant change and then who is more likely to sort of breeze through this week?
Yeah, people between the ages of 36 and 39 born in April. No, not without looking at their whole chart. And it's true when we get to the major significant events, which a lot of this week is leading up to a crescendo of the sun squaring Uranus on Friday, and then the moon is full on Sunday, but the full moon is also square Uranus, which is why we have changes. So what this means, since Uranus is in Taurus and the sun is in Aquarius, this means that fixed signs might feel this the most, because if you're a Taurus, then the sun in Aquarius is squaring your sun sign. Uranus is in the same sign as your sun sign, and then the full moon will be opposite. And you can do that the same for if you're a Taurus or if you're a Leo or if you're a Scorpio. Those are but you might not be a fixed sign, and you might not have a moon or ascendant in that fixed sign, but you could have Jupiter or any other planet that is sensitive to those points. And so we have to be careful about who we say gets, energized by these different things. And then on top of that, since it's Uranus, which is the planet of change, there are those people who have a very strongly placed Uranus in their birth chart, and therefore they're more sensitive to Uranus. And so it's a little bit more complicated than just saying, these signs or those signs, but that's the rough lay of the land. And I think that in order to look at this week, me, it's like, what's the most important day of the week? Well, it's in 3 weeks. Actually, the most important day of this week is the full moon on Sunday. So I'm not breaking out there, but I do think we need to, in our mind, go back to January 21st at the new moon in Aquarius, because remember, the full moon is just a height of energy that was seeded at the new moon. The full moon is the culmination of the energy from the new moon. And that new moon in Aquarius was very powerful because it's moving the energy where it's been bottled up for years in a way in Capricorn. That new moon in Aquarius is kind of like a signal that we're in for major changes over the next year and even years. And also that new moon had Venus conjunct Saturn, which also has to do with a bit of restraint. And so this common theme that we've had for what seems like years is the bolt ahead into the future, but hold back. But I think now, and this is where we're going to start the actual week, is that we're bolting into the future, like it or not, on the opening day of this week, which is, it's the 30th on Monday. We now have all planets moving direct. And we're coming off of this incredibly potent Mars that was retrograde and Mercury retrograde while the Mars was retrograde. And if anybody doubts the power, of these retrogrades, just look back to, to earlier in the month when we had those 15 votes on the floor of the Congress. It was a Mercury and Mars retrograde, the energy to move forward, and yet it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. And then the first time ever, the entire airline system in the United States, literally shuts down on the Mars station direct. Because the thing is that, and I've said this many times before, but when a planet like Mars stations to go retrograde or direct, and it turned direct back on January 12th. But on January 12th, when it turned direct, it was at 8 degrees of Gemini. It was at 8 degrees of Gemini on January 1st. And it was at 8 degrees of Gemini on January 24th. So it was micro moving back and forth, but that whole idea of a planet just saying, oh, it's direct today, everything loosens up, the icebergs are now melted and away we go. That's the theory, but the practice, you have to look at the planet and the movement. Now, having said that, as we hit this new week, it's technically the first week of February rather than the last week of January, but it starts on January 30th. On January 30th, we have a Moon-Mars conjunction in Gemini, and Mars has bolted ahead, and it's all the way to 10 degrees. I mean, in other words, it's moved barely, not even 2 degrees, 1.5 degrees, but it's moving ahead. And it's now noticeable, and it wasn't noticeable until now. So as we hit February, we're getting a sense that Mars is moving ahead. The same thing with Mercury. I mean, Mercury retrograded also back to about 8 degrees, give or take a degree of Capricorn. Now we start this week with Mercury at 15 degrees of Capricorn. So that Mercury is, really, it's moving ahead and it's gaining speed. In fact, by the end of the week, Mercury is at 23 degrees of Capricorn. So it's already moving faster than a degree a day. So we're back in the swing of things with Mercury. And so this sets the tone for the changes this week, because there is, in fact, a thrust, a movement forward. And so the Monday itself, we begin the day with the moon just moving into Gemini, which is also like a loosening of energy. When the moon moves into Gemini after having been in Taurus for a couple of days, often we feel more flexibility, adaptability. We feel like we can move. We may not be as stuck. And when that moon moves into Gemini at just 12:34 a.m. on Monday morning, first day of the week, it almost immediately encounters Mars. By 8:30 today, the moon catches up with Mars. So on Monday, we're going to be feeling that Moon-Mars energy. We may have excess anger. We may have just simply a desire. We get out of bed and we're saying, wow, there's just this sense of wanting to go, of wanting to go forward. And in fact, by later this evening, the moon also makes a trine to the sun. So remember, we have Mars in Gemini making a trine to the sun and the moon lining up with Mars. So this is fiery energy. This is like a feel good day. And actually, I misspoke. The exact trine of Mars to the sun was yesterday, meaning Sunday of the prior week. But we're still feeling that today, and especially as the moon sweeps through there. And then there's one other thing today that I think is significant, and that is Mercury, which is, moving forward. It makes a biquintile with Mars. And now Mercury is communication, and Mars is setting boundaries. It's assertion when it's used healthily. It's aggression when it's too much, but it's establishing boundaries. It's the ego wanting to establish boundaries. And Mercury in Capricorn is doing it through communication that is rather steady. It's real. It's not made up. It's not fantasy stuff. But the quintile series, which many astrologers don't use, we're going to be digging into that in Foundations Level 3 as we go into these harmonic aspects of quintiles and septiles and uncover a whole layer of magic that most people don't even realize exists. We're going to blow some minds. But on Monday, while Mercury is biquintiling Mars, quintiles are very creative. They don't follow a plan. They're like magical. They're charismatic. And so in some way, the ability to use the mind, Mercury, in order to get to where we're going is going to be very powerful. And again, we're also just coming off of yesterday, meaning Sunday's Mercury trine Uranus. And so we're already buzzing. We go into this week buzzing. And it's Uranus, though. Again, we're ready for change. So that's the way the week cooks, the very beginning. And it's like we get out of bed on Monday morning on the right side of the bed. Now, there's a lot that can go wrong in a day for anyone. I'm not being negative, but we start with this excitement, this enthusiasm, this ready to go kind of energy.
Rick, before you go on, I just wanted to mention to anybody who's interested in taking the class on the quintiles, septiles, biquintiles, the harmonic aspects that Rick's talking about, registration is open. So you can go to astrologyhub.com/foundations3. And this is taught by Rick.
Foundations number 3.
Yes, the number 3. And we'll put that link in the show notes as well. But Rick's going to be teaching that class. I know he's super excited to be teaching this. And by the name of those aspects, it doesn't sound that interesting. But when you start to unpack what they actually reveal in the chart and why it's so important, especially now for all of us to begin paying attention to these in the chart, because they're giving us a layer of access into the person that we can't get if we aren't looking at these aspects. So I love that you're teaching this for us.
Yeah. And I must say, my observation of these over the years, and I don't want to get distracted into the course material, but my observation of these over the years is that on one level, they can be quite subtle, but as we know, sometimes the subtle thing is the most profound, and that they're much more potent in natal astrology than they seem to be in transit or mundane astrology. I'm mentioning it here, this Mercury biquintile Mars, because it is the strongest aspect of the day. But if there were other aspects in the day, if you were trained, you might notice it, but they're less obvious. And so often we respond to those things that are the most obvious.
Okay, great. All right. So let's go into Tuesday.
Tuesday's a bit of a sleeper. I mean, Venus is making a semi-sextile with Jupiter, and semi-sextiles are kind of an interesting aspect. They don't seem to carry as much weight in their movement. Semi-sextiles are what Ptolemy called inconjuncts, meaning that they were in aversion. They couldn't even see each other. There was nothing going on. We moderners treat it a little bit differently, but there is a tension between Venus, what we like, what we love, what we're attracted to, our values, and Jupiter, the make it bigger, make it better, make it more. And yet the two of them aren't quite working out of the same page or book today. And that might be frustrating, but we might not even notice. I mean, Tuesday is a bit of an annoying day, I think, but it's not a big enough deal for us to do anything about it. And I find it intriguing that it's these kinds of days when other stuff comes up, stuff that has nothing to do with today. It's the thing is, like, you work your butt off all week and you have all these things you want to do on Saturday, or just take the day off, and you wake up Saturday morning and you have a cold and you can't move because you didn't have time during the week to process it. You process it when you have time. And I think astrology is like that. And if you just follow the what's going on in the sky, sometimes you miss the fact that it's these quieter days when stuff comes up because that's Tuesday. Moon's still in Gemini, though. And in fact, that moon by the end of the day in Gemini is squaring Neptune, which can be a bit confusing because Neptune is the planet of melting away the reality of Saturn. On Wednesday, the energy picks up a bit, but it also becomes a bit more internalized. At noon, these are all Pacific times that I'm giving. At noon, actually at 12:11 p.m., the moon moves from Gemini into Cancer. And as it does that, our energies, instead of being fragmented, distracted, adaptable, outgoing, engaging, kind of just this moving around. I always think of the moon in Gemini like the old-fashioned telephone operators who are just plugging this in with making the connections. The moon moves into Cancer on February 1st, and we lose interest in making those connections. We go internal. We tend to go quiet. We tend to become more reflective. And again, this can vary person to person, because if someone, for example, has their natal Mars in Cancer, when the moon goes into Cancer, their Mars is going to be energized. So we have to be careful. But the general sweep is that when the moon goes into Cancer, we tend to go inward. We tend to pull in. We tend to create boundaries, but not like Mars boundaries by creating war or rattling people's cages or yelling people to get out of our house or whatever. Instead, with the moon in Cancer, we create boundaries by just becoming invisible, by sucking the energy in, by being non-confrontive. I think sometimes a key word for Cancerian energy, this is, sun, moon, ascendant, anything, is passive aggressive. But we have to even be careful about that, because as I've said many, many times, we have to remember that astrology was written by guys for guys. I mean, it is in essence a growth out of a patriarchal view of the universe. And so Cancer is not considered to be a patriarchal sign because it's caring, it's nurturing, it's soothing, it's gentle. And so when the moon goes into Cancer and we may get passive aggressive, that's a male label. We might just be more okay with it. And if we're angry, we'll hold on to it. We'll work it out over time, whatever. So we have to be careful about all these kinds of labels. Anyhow, the other thing that happens on the first of the month on Wednesday is that the sun in Aquarius reaches 12 degrees of Aquarius, and Chiron, which is now moving direct, is at 12 degrees of Aries. So Aquarius, air, and Aries, fire. The 12 degrees Aquarius air sign sun forms a sextile with Chiron at 12 degrees of Aries fire. Fire and air go together. And so here we have a matched polarity, but it's a yang polarity because fire and air are yang, whereas water and earth are yin. In fact, we have the moon moving into a yin energy, pull in, gentle, caring, passive. And we have the sun and Chiron outgoing and now connecting. Jupiter also is in Aries, but it's the sun sextile Chiron that I think makes the day, because it gives us the ability to understand our enemy, to understand those parts of ourselves that don't work the way we wished they would. We have the ability to heal. And the healing is a combination of this engaging energy of the sun Chiron sextile and the moon in Cancer, which is like the taking care of. So Wednesday to me, I think is a stabilizing and relatively sweet day. Again, there's not a lot of action. And it's interesting because often in astrology, it's just like being a kid, and anyone who's been a parent knows that kids go through growth spurts where nothing happens. They go to sleep and they wake up and they're just taller. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but we don't move forward like this. We move forward like this. We make these jumps. So I think on some level, Tuesday, Wednesday, and even into Thursday, we're getting a little bit of what Freud would call a latent period. The energy's there, but it's just not quite as on the surface. Thursday, very early in the morning, even late Wednesday night, depending on where you are, the moon squares Jupiter and trines Venus. This is like a bad news, good news. It's just like there's stuff going on, but it's not overwhelming. During the day, the moon moves into a square with Chiron, quincunxes the sun. This is a bit annoying in the afternoon, but again, I don't think it's anything overwhelming. And then by dinner time, and that is again Pacific Coast dinner time, 5, 6 o'clock, or 7 o'clock, the moon forms a sextile. And this is actually a bellwether. This is the moon sextiling Uranus normally is an aspect that lasts an hour or 2 or 3. And because moon aspects, the moon moves quickly enough that it doesn't, really matter in the long term. But when the moon in Cancer makes that sextile to Uranus, it's giving us an advanced warning notice that we need to pay attention to Uranus. And the sooner we begin paying attention to Uranus, the better, because the sun by Thursday afternoon is already within a degree of squaring Uranus. Often when we do these weekly transits, we talk about the exact day of a transit. So the sun moves into 15 degrees of Aquarius on Friday evening, which is exactly squaring Uranus at 15 degrees of Taurus. But on Thursday, the sun is at 14 degrees of Aquarius, and we're feeling that. In fact, we're feeling it building all week, and it's almost like something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. And the question is, do you want to taste the sugar or be the sugar? Do you want to respond to the change, or do you want to be the change? This is the big question with Uranus. And on one hand, we're going more changes. I mean, haven't we had enough change for a while? Can't we just have like a day, a month, a year or 2 off where we just kind of can just do our daily stuff and not be bothered? Well, no, not yet. And so on Friday, as the sun moves closer and closer to the square, which is exact by Friday evening at 6:50 p.m. But again, I mean, the sun moves about a degree a day. So we're going to feel that square really kind of beginning a little bit on Wednesday, Thursday more, Friday a lot, but we're still going to feel it on Saturday and Sunday. And in fact, on Sunday, when we have the moon is going to bring that Uranus right back up into our faces. And we'll get there in just a moment. But that's why this is a week of change. So, and again, there's many ways in which we can subdue cosmic energy as a form of disassociation, avoidance, of ignoring it, which is really ignorance. And the thing is that when we have an aspect like this, the highest use of it is to engage it. I remember being in India lecturing in Calcutta during a lunar eclipse. I was on the program while there was a total lunar eclipse outside and the moon was red. Now, in the Vedic tradition, you do not want to put crystals out and you do not want to be out under an eclipse because they're an adverse energy. Now, my belief is that there are no adverse energies, and that may be slightly overstating it. It's how we react to them. And I think that I've heard many people voice this in different ways. Oh, I have, Pluto's going to be blah, blah, blah in my chart. I'm just going to go into hiding for the, or my Saturn is going to be, crossing my natal moon next week exactly. I've canceled all my appointments. I'm staying home. I'm going to hide under the bed. It's not an effective way to get the most out of a transit, because the things that we go into denial over, or the things that we're hiding from, will still be buried physically, because emotions live in our body physically. They'll still be buried, and those things will still be annoying, and the transit will pass, and we will have missed our chance to engage it or to do something about it. So back to this week, is we can go, too much change. I need some time off. I'm just gonna, microdose on mushrooms for the rest of the week, which is legal in many necks of the woods these days, or whatever it is that you might do to totally chill out and relax. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be relaxation and either meditation or prayer involved. But understand that the sun square Uranus on Friday is going to, in some way, create a metaphysical storm. Oh, it could be physical, because remember, metaphysics creates physics. And so the sun in Aquarius, and Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, or the planet associated with the sign of Aquarius. Some people would feel more comfortable with that. And so as the sun in Aquarius is creating a conflictive dynamic aspect square to Uranus in Taurus, it's like something's got to break loose. And yes, we can sleep through it, and, take our Xanax or whatever and smooth things out. But the universe has something to tell us. And that will begin on Thursday, because we'll be feeling the square already. And as the moon on Thursday afternoon quincunxes the sun and then sextiles Uranus, that's that early warning that I talked about before. But by the time we get to Friday, there's something for us to do. And if we do it, it won't do us. There's an astrologer, I don't know if you know Bruce Scoville, master's degree, very smart, very, very astute astrologer, been a longtime faculty member at Kepler College. And many years ago, Bruce wrote an article in the Mountain Astrologer, which was his theory of symbolic substitution. And some of it was meant tongue in cheek, and some of it was meant to be absolutely, this is the way it works. So, Uranus is electrical. The planet Uranus is associated with electricity, like the planet Neptune is associated with magnetism. And of course, we know electromagnetism are, in effect, they work together. But the action of Uranus is instantaneous. It's lightning striking. It's shocking. It's getting into an accident, which is often getting into a purpose. But I don't want to go into that linguistic thing, because often when Uranus occurs and there is an accident, it happens as part of a wake-up call. Not always, but often. But the Uranus energy is like a spark, like a shock, like a aha. In fact, it's called Uranus the Awakener. The light bulb goes on. A light bulb doesn't take an hour to warm up. It's off, on, off, on. That's the way electricity works. That's the way Uranus works. Very different than Neptune magnetism, which is kind of more mysterious, and it comes in its fields. It's like even the magnetism, animal magnetism, mesmerism, hypnotism. These are all there's no lightning striking. It's fog, mist. It's creativity within that. It can be brilliant, but that's the difference between Uranus and Neptune. Here we have the sun moving through Uranus's sign, Aquarius, which is also electrical. The symbol of Aquarius, the jiggity lines, most people don't have a clue as to what that means. And I'll tell you, it's very simple. There is electricity in the air, and electricity is wave-like. And the thing is that dry air doesn't conduct electricity. Ask anyone who's lived in Norway, Sweden, Minnesota, northern Canada in the winter. You go to turn on a light, and you just get the habit of, instead of reaching for the light switch and turning it on, you hit your hand against the light switch because you want to minimize the feeling of the shock you get when you ground to anything. You shake someone's hand, and it's shocking because the electricity is not conducted in dry air. Now you compare that with life in Hawaii or in a rainforest, where the humid, or in the Mediterranean, where the humidity is higher and there's much more psychic communication. We conduct that magnetism and electricity more readily through wet air than dry air. Nervous system. And in fact, the nervous system is electrical. And the nervous system cannot work unless it's wet, because it's the water in the, the sodium potassium chain that creates an impulse down the nervous system. That's like a wet cell. It needs to have water. What is Aquarius? It's the water bearer, and it's an air sign. And so it has to do with the water in the air that conducts the lightning. There is such a thing as dry lightning, but lightning happens typically when there's humidity, because that's what makes the sparks flow.
Rick, this is mind blowing. I mean, this is amazing.
So here's the punchline to all of this. The punchline is that when the sun squares Uranus, the lightning wants to strike. And remember, lightning only strikes when there's tension that's built up. There cannot be lightning unless there's a strong positive and negative, and I don't mean that as a value judgment. I mean that as an electrical charge, a plus charge, a minus charge. And the stronger that charge is, the more it builds up. And the thing is with Uranus, is that, like, you get this warm, wet air mass that has a negative ionization. Negative ions feel good. It's what happens when water mixes with water and there's movement, and the warmer it is, the more negative ions are created. That's why we feel good by a warm ocean with the waves, or in a shower, or in a waterfall, or even a babbling, murmuring brook. These are all negative ion generators. Meanwhile, a cold, dry air mass is a positive generator. And in fact, that saying, an ill wind blows no good, these are the cold air or the dry air that either come across the Sahara, like the fen that come up through Switzerland, or the Sabras in Israel, or the Santa Anas in Southern California, or the Chinooks in the northern United States. These are ill winds that blow no good. Why? Because they're positive ions and they make us uncomfortable. They make the mosquitoes swarm and the bugs kind of get a little. So when a positive air mass, cold, dry air, a positive charge, meets a wet, warm air mass, negative ions, and they start coming together. And as they get together, they try to work it out. And I'm going to say something that's very unpopular, psychologically unpopular. And that is that communication doesn't always lead to resolution. In fact, there are things in each and every one of our lives that we've learned don't go there. Because when we do, it just makes things worse. Are you with me here?
Yes, because my mom would always say that communication basically solves everything.
Well, it solves a lot of things.
It can. And you're right. There are times when it absolutely aggravates the situation. It makes it worse.
That's right. And we intelligently learn that when we have one of those things, we sidestep it, we go around it. But as we do, that builds tension. Just like the two air masses that are trying to communicate, they're trying to work it out. And the more they rub up against each other, you know what happens? The charge develops, like static electricity of rubbing wool, on a comb and kind of getting that charge. That static electricity builds. And so the communication can actually make the tension greater and greater and greater and greater. And then the sun squares Uranus and lightning strikes. And when lightning strikes, it's really good for it not to strike you, which means that you can either be struck by the lightning or you can be the lightning. You can taste the sugar or be the sugar. And so the lesson of this week is that although the theme is what? More change? We're back to this. More change is that the more proactive we can each be. And it doesn't mean doing stupid stuff, but it means working toward bringing those things which are buried out into the open enough so that there's not enough tension for the lightning to generate.
So, Rick, you often say with Uranus that it's unpredictable. So it's not like here we are on Monday. We can look ahead at this potential for change this weekend and be thinking that we can strategically do something about it, really, because we probably won't know where or how it will strike. And I'm asking that as a question. Is that correct?
That's partially correct. When we say we don't know, and then lightning strikes, we don't know because we're in denial. Lightning does not have to strike in a destructive way. Lightning can strike in an inventive, awareness, creative, magical breakthrough. I never looked at it like this. I don't have to do this. I can do this. And in other words, the idea of Uranus being unpredictable, it's like one of those, what do they call them? It's like a ratio. The more unpredictable it is, the less we are aware of the issues that if we were aware of, it would become more predictable. And in fact, might not even generate an event because we're working with the energy rather than having it waking us up.
Love it. Okay.
So this is all leading to not just the sun square to Uranus on Friday, but remember, this hangs around. And remember, the moon is still in Cancer through Friday. And so even though there's this stuff happening out there, we're still in a softer internal mindset as the moon in Cancer opposes Mercury. It harmonizes trines with Neptune. And then by the very end of the day, the moon actually opposes Pluto. Remember, Pluto's still back at the very end of Capricorn, so that when the sun gets to the end of Cancer, it's going to kind of deepen that energy. The sun square Uranus has technically, it has technically already occurred, but it's still within sparking, it's still within distance of being able to generate a spark. And then on Saturday, extremely early, just after midnight on Saturday morning. And again, depending on where you are on the East Coast, this will be, on the East Coast, it'll be later, but in Hawaii, it'll be late Friday night. But at 12:48 a.m. on Saturday, the moon moves into Leo. And now it's feeding the show. It's feeding the expression. And when the moon moves into Leo, it's going to, within a couple of hours, trine Jupiter in Aries. Actually, within a few hours, almost till midday before the moon actually perfects that trine to Jupiter. But now we have this kind of building express it. Before it was internalized, but the moon moves into Leo, and the moon harmonizing or trining Jupiter is like what just came to mind. It's greased lightning. It's just it's like too easy to express, or maybe it's easier to express than to not express. But there's two other things that are happening on Saturday. Oh, and by the way, by later in the day, the moon in Leo will be making a sextile with Mars in Gemini. But all of these are positive and expressive energies. Totally separate from that, two other things are occurring. One is that Venus, which has been and still is moving through Pisces, which is Venus's favorite place to be. We know in astrology, every planet has a home sign or two. Venus's home signs are Taurus and Libra, but every planet has a sign in which it's exalted. It's the place where we're treated like a king rather than treated like we're at home in the king. Somehow you go somewhere else and you have more dignity, which is what it has. That's the astrological word. It's dignified. But Venus is dignified, or it has dignity, because it's exalted in Pisces. But what happens on February 4th is that Venus reaches 11 degrees of Pisces, and Mars, which is still tooling along, has moved a degree in this whole week from 10 degrees to 11 degrees. So we have Venus squaring Mars exactly. Now, again, this exact thing is important because Venus has really been squaring Mars all week. I mean, we could go back to January 30th, and Venus was at almost 5 degrees of Pisces, and Mars was at 10 degrees of Gemini. So it was already moving toward that square 5-degree orb. We're feeling it, but it's absolutely exact on Saturday. And the square between Venus and Mars is now feeding into the square between the Sun and Uranus. And Venus and Mars square is at once one of the most troublesome and can be one of the most fun squares. Troublesome because Venus and Mars are the lovers. Venus is what we like and Mars is how we get it. Venus is our feelings of attraction and desire and what we value, and Mars is how we fight for it. Mars is physical. Mars is Venus is the emotional side of romance, and Mars is the physical side of romance or even sexuality. And these two are 90 degrees to each other, which means they're not seeing the same thing. They are in conflict, like the Sun in Aquarius is in conflict square to Uranus and Taurus. Now we have Venus and Mars in conflict. And this conflict can be quite troublesome because we can have a really difficult time being with someone we love. We can be irritable. We can just be annoyed. We can be annoyed with people around us. We can be annoyed with ourselves. And this is not necessarily fun, but it's certainly feeding the tension to the Uranus Sun square that's going on simultaneously. And there is an upside to it because, how do I want to say this? Makeup sex. When we have a fight, Venus and Mars, when they duke it out, man, the coming back together can be incredibly powerful and magical. And it doesn't even have to be a fight because Venus and Mars square can be incredibly creative if we can find a way to sidestep our ego and instead engage respect. It's a tricky dance because the sun is also squaring Uranus and the sky is ready to let loose the lightning. So we might go in with a very playful attitude and just realize that we've just trashed a relationship. I'm not saying that'll happen. I'm talking in caricature to make my point. But it's a very dynamic day, Saturday. And on top of that, there's one other thing that I think is also interesting and important, and that is the sun early in the morning makes an exact septile with Jupiter. And again, here we get to what I like to call the X-tiles. The X-tiles is the truth is out there. The X-files, the X-tiles. But the septile is 1/7 of a circle, and it's another harmonic aspect. And they are complicated. They're not like the quintiles, which are charismatic and creative and spiritual and magical, metaphysical, and can be very beautiful. The septile, they're based on 5, like a 5-pointed star, or even like a rose, which is a 5-pointed star with the edges smooth, the points. So a septile is complicated. Septiles don't fit in very easily. And in fact, I could say that the quintile series is Venus related because they're beautiful. The septile series is kind of Uranus related because they don't fit in. And often they're perceived as something that happens that's just faded. It happens out of the blue, and we don't know where it's coming from, and we don't know why it happened, but it just changed everything. And one of the strongest moments in time of transiting septiles was September 11th, 2001. It wasn't just, the Saturn-Pluto opposition, which it was. It was also something came crashing through, literally, from the other side, literally. But septiles often have stuff that kind of come crashing through from the other side and has that aha or lightning or faded kind of thing. We'll dig into those deeply because they can be so powerful in a chart. In fact, there are many natal charts of which the chart works without it, but when you look at the septile, all of a sudden you go, oh my God. I mean, of course, and you see it from another whole perspective. So the septile here is between the sun and Jupiter. And what that means, again, now we're looking at yang. The sun is in Aquarius, Jupiter is in Aries. By sign, they're sextile, but by degree, it's 51 degrees. We wouldn't notice it unless we had a computer calculate. But this suggests that something positive can occur. That would be Jupiter, something growth oriented, something in some way that opens our minds or creates an opportunity. And it's to the sun. And remember, the sun is 1/2 of the Sun-Uranus square. So this kind of comes back to the Uranus thing again. And it's all feeding into something breaks loose, something breaks free, something comes crashing through from the other side. And then that brings us to the culminating day of the week. And that is with the moon in Cancer on Sunday, February 5th at 10:28 a.m. Pacific time. The moon at 16 degrees of Leo and 41 minutes opposes the sun at 16 degrees of Aquarius, 41 minutes. And remember, Uranus is only at 15 degrees of Taurus, but that's still, it's like within a degree of being square. So the moon will actually square Uranus exactly at 7:00, 7:08 a.m. on Sunday morning. And then it's a full moon at 10:28. And when the moon squares Uranus and opposes the sun, it um, excites that entire circuit with the sun square Uranus, even though it occurred 2 days ago, technically exactly. And this full moon is basically changes. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that David Bowie has because his song was Changes. Yeah. And David Bowie has one of the strongest septile charts I've ever seen. We'll look at his chart in phonics class. But this is change, and it's more change, and I don't think there's any way to avoid it. I don't know the fullness of what it is that's going to go down, but because it's a Sunday, what goes down may not go down till Monday, even though I've just extended out beyond my contract. But Monday, the 6th, in some ways, will be the after effect or the after image yet of the full moon that occurred on Sunday. But this is a powerful one.
Wow. I just need to make a note here. There really is no contract. For Rick. He often says that when he goes beyond whatever the week or the month that we're talking about. I've had people in the comments say, well, that's not very nice that you give a contract. It's like, oh my, there really is no contract. He's just joking.
There really is no contract.
Yes. But this is the first time in a while that I can remember you and or any astrologers really emphasizing a full moon as this huge culminating moment of change. Like I can't remember that recently at all. Can you?
Well, I can't remember what I had for breakfast, so no.
All right. Well, it definitely seems unique and very highlighted this time around.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, and Uranus, like I said, Uranus is the key player pretty much.
Yeah.
All week.
Amazing. Okay, so we have this idea around bolting into the future because we have all the planets moving direct, and that this is now noticeable. Like we've been talking about on the weekly weather for several weeks. We've had it's about to be all the planets moving direct, and then they're all moving direct, but they're still kind of at the same point. You're saying now this forward movement is very noticeable.
Yes, and I would insert here that, as I said, looking at 2023 when we did that back in December, that 2023 really doesn't really begin until late March.
Right.
But we're getting movement toward it now that everything's moving direct. But Mars, even though it's moving direct, is still within its shadow. It's been here before, and it's not until the end of March when Mars breaks out of Gemini, moves into Cancer. And in March, it's when Saturn, which has been in Aquarius for a couple of years, moves into Pisces. And in March, Pluto, which has been in Capricorn for a couple of decades, moves into Aquarius. So we're getting the change. There's no question about it. But we're still not getting, what do they say? The other shoe drops,
Right. That's usually a negative connotation, that statement.
All right, then maybe it's the other swim fin drops. I don't know. It's like there's another piece to all this.
Right. I keep thinking of like your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time, where it feels, but that's not making it seem like change. So
right, and that's more, and the foot on the gas and the foot on the brake is more Saturn, Mars. Mars go, Saturn no.
Right.
This is a little different because, again, there's big tidal changes that are occurring, and we're in the tide, and it's already carrying us, and we can tell it, and we can tell that, but it's carrying us through territory where we've already been, even though it's new, because we now know there's not a holding back, and we're going to go into newer places yet.
All right. So you said that we're going to be starting the week buzzing, that there's a buzzing energy to this week. It's basically,
and we're going to end it buzzing.
exactly. It's culminating on Sunday, so that there's that undertone all week, even though there's a couple days that aren't as obviously active. So you basically, Tuesday, you said, is a little bit of a sleeper day. Wednesday is more internal and quiet and reflective. Thursday, you brought up this sort of like latent period where there is this energy.
Right. But
brewing,
remember,
you know,
Amanda, that even Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we're going to be feeling the Venus pushing the square, the tension building or the conflict building, Venus pushing the square to Mars. And we're going to be feeling the sun pushing that square to Uranus. And hopefully for those of us who are really paying attention, and I say us because not because I'm including myself, but it's a fantasy. It's a wish fulfillment. I would like to think that I will be in that group. That the earlier in the week we begin to be in touch with the Uranus and begin to engage it and begin to act as if this is unfolding, the better off we're going to be.
Okay. So being mindful of the Uranian change energy all week is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. All right. And you actually said that under Thursday. You said, pay attention to Uranus. Something's going to happen. That's what I wrote down in my notes. Okay. And then you also brought up, do we want to taste the sugar or be the sugar? Do we want to be forced to change, or do we want to be the change? Do we want to be struck by lightning or be the lightning? I mean, this is a big theme all week.
I had a client once that, in the time that I knew her as a client over probably 10 years, there were 2 times where her, in one case, husband, in one case, a long-term partner, basically left suddenly with a note on the refrigerator.
No.
Yeah.
The same way? They both did it the same way?
Well, I'm using that as a metaphor. One of them was just a note on the table. And
right.
But, I mean, it was just basically, I can't take it anymore. I'm out of here.
Wow. Wow.
And this client had the sun opposed Uranus natally. And basically, when you have an opposition, often there's a part of you that you're suppressing and making other people act out. And so the concept was, and she worked on this, and I don't think this happened again to her, but the thing was that as long as she was not being as weird, eccentric, erratic, and crazy as she felt, she was attracting people to her that were weird, eccentric, erratic, unreliable, and that were living out her stuff, so that she was always the one that was right and they were the bad ones leaving when it was actually her stuff.
Wow. That is so fascinating how we do that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. We're really good at it too.
We're
good enough at it that we don't know we're doing it, even if we're smart.
Amazing. Well, that's where astrology can be so helpful, because it's like, hey, this is you're projecting this part of you out into other people. But if you actually embrace that and internalize it even more, then you don't have to project it out to other people. Yeah. All right. So then we have that basically Saturday, Sunday, all of this is about this big full moon Uranian energy. Yeah. This energy of change.
Full moon. And again, full moon is in Leo. There's something about wanting to put this energy out. And I should say here also that we hear again and again and again, we're back to this male bias thing in astrology about how Leo is about the show, the presentation, the on stage, the over dramatic. That's male Leo.
Mm-hmm.
That the feminine energy, or the yin Leo energy, is not interested. You look at the lion kingdom or queendom, the boy lions spend most of their lives posturing, roaring, fighting to see who's going to be top cat, because the alpha male lion doesn't get the alpha male or the alpha female lioness. The alpha male lion gets all the lionesses in the local area. So there's a lot at stake. So the male And again, I'm using this less as, sex type than gender energy, that the male energy, which is what the astrology focuses on, is about boasting. It's sports. It's I'm on top. I'm the winner. Look at me. I'm center stage. Whereas the real meaning of Leo, if you look at the lioness, they don't have time for that bullshit. Why? Because they're raising the young. They're doing the hunting. They're balancing the books. They're taking out the trash. They're making sure the bills are paid. They're doing all the things. And so they don't have time for that's the boys are doing that. They're coming home drinking beer and going and playing football, And so the real meaning of the Leo moon is about intention. It's fixed fire. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to follow through with it. And so the full moon in Leo is how we feel, but it's opposing the sun in Aquarius, which is lighting up the collective. We're back to the water in the air. It's the air that everyone's breathing. So it's definitely, an individual versus collective society issue, with Uranus at the square point saying something needs to give.
Amazing. All right. Well, huge week ahead, everybody. If you love Rick and you have either participated in Astrology Foundations Level 1 and Level 2, and you're ready to round this out with Level 3, or if you've been studying astrology for a while and you are intrigued by these aspects that Rick continues to talk about on most shows that we have on this channel, then you will want to check out Astrology Foundations Level 3. And that is at astrologyhub.com/foundations3, the number. And you do not have to have taken Level 1 and Level 2 in order to take Level 3, but you definitely need to have a certain level of comfort looking at charts. And
you basically need to know the planet signs, houses, and and the aspects that everyone else uses.
Right.
Just for the record, I would no sooner do a natal chart without quintiles, septiles, and octiles, which are the half squares and square and a halves. I would no sooner do a chart without those aspects than I would without Mars or without trines. That's how important.
It's that central to the astrology that you practice.
And I came into astrology on a book by a guy named Michael Meyer, who was a student of Dane Rudhyar, who wrote about these non-traditional aspects, including quintiles and septiles. And Michael Meyer's book called The Handbook for Humanistic Astrologers. A handbook for the humanistic astrologer, one or the other. Basically, in the section on aspects, it didn't weight one as more important than the other. So we're talking like the early 70s when I was really digging into aspects. I read that book. It never dawned on me everyone didn't use these. So I've been using them for 50 years.
Wow. It's what makes you perfect for teaching this course. And it's what makes it really valuable, though, because you can't just get the information everywhere. It's definitely something that not a whole lot of astrologers are talking about or teaching. So thank you for bringing that here to us at Astrology Hub. And if any of you are curious, again, check that out, astrologyhub.com/foundations3. We would love to have you in the class. If you are interested in taking the Level 1 and Level 2, you can do that still. Just go to astrologyhub.com/Levine bundle. That's LEVINE and then the word bundle. And that's where you can get all the classes that we've already done. And then you'll be ready for our Level 3 here. Class is beginning next week. So if you want to take advantage of the launch pricing of the event, the live event pricing, you'll want to join us in the next couple of weeks. All right. Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much for getting us ready for the week ahead, for getting us prepared for all this change, but also really, sometimes I think with change, just knowing that it's coming and being in a stance that is more flexible, that is, open and ready to be adaptable and adjust with whatever it is that comes up. It's so helpful. And so thank you for that. And thanks to all of you for being here. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. And thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. We will look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Take care.
If you've studied astrology, you're probably familiar with aspects like trines, squares, and oppositions. But did you know that there are a lot more aspects you can read in an astrological chart? In Astrology Foundations Level 3 with Master Astrologer Rick Levine, you'll learn the magic of quintiles, septiles, and other harmonic aspects. And understanding these aspects will take your understanding of astrology way beyond the ordinary, or even what you thought was possible. Rick Levine is one of the foremost thinkers on harmonic aspects, and he's going to share his mind-blowing perspective with you in Astrology Foundations Level 3. By the end of this 4-week course, plus 2 bonus weeks of live sessions with Rick, you'll get a complete overview of harmonic aspects that will change the way you look at astrology forever. Learn more and enroll today at astrologyhub.com/foundations3. Again, that's astrologyhub.com/foundations3.